Hello and welcome to our second instructional design seminar hosted by the University of Massachusetts Amherst. My name is Slava Yurchenkov. I'm the manager of instructional design here at UMass Amherst, and I will be facilitating today's event. Here we discuss the best practices, share ideas, and the goal is to inspire all educators to improve student experiences, develop highly effective courses. And I actually would like to thank everyone who joined us today. We have 450 participants from 9 US states and from different countries such as Canada, Australia, India, South Africa, France, and other countries. So thank you so much for joining us today. And also thank you so much for being so active and sending your questions ahead of time. We included so many questions to our scenario today. And I encourage you to continue asking questions in the YouTube comment section, and I will see when I see the most interesting questions, I will definitely try to ask them to our wonderful experts who will be joining us today. Today we decided to talk about active learning, and we've chosen this topic because it directly impacts student success, and we want to explore how we can integrate more of it into our teaching practices, both in online and in-person classes. As you all know, there isn't a fixed number of active learning formats, but there are dozens of commonly used strategies, and most of them they're grouped into several broad categories like individual activities, peer-to-peer activities, group activities, and game-based, and etc. And our goal today is to discuss what are the most effective active learning strategies for online and in-person courses. How can technology support and enhance active learning? What challenges do educators face when integrating active learning, and how can they be overcome? And how can we measure the impact of active learning on student success? And we have a really great panel discussion today. We invited four wonderful speakers. And right now, I'll provide them opportunity to introduce themselves, to briefly tell their story, and there is a short question that I'd like them to answer why they believe the audience will benefit from attending today's seminar. We will start with Luke. Luke, kick us off. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Slava. And hello, folks. My name is Dr. Luke Hobson. I'm the Assistant Director of Instructional Design over at MIT, specifically within the Professional Development Division. I'm also a lecturer at the University of Miami School of Education and Human Development. I teach in the EDD program for Applied Learning Sciences. And because of the fact that I love to obliterate all of my free time, I also have a blog, a podcast, a book, a YouTube channel, and a bunch of other things as well, discussing and sharing more about the joys of designing learning experiences. And to answer Slava's question about why you folks are here and what you're going to be able to be taking away from this from active learning strategies really is to be able to give you as many concrete examples as possible, not just to share more about from a theoretical perspective, but to also make sure that you're understanding or two from a concrete perspective and how to be able to actually take these back into your classroom, whether in person, online, hybrid, whatever it is, trying to be able to serve all folks.
Thank you. And
Oh, Hi, I am Dr. Anne Marie Sylvia. I am a newly minted PhD, just graduating this May in kinesiology. My research interests are physical activity and neurodivergence, and I focus a lot on active learning and how we can change the classroom environment for our neurodivergent populations here at college. And I think why the audience should attend is because hopefully it's going to spark some innovation and creative thinking for you to take back to your classrooms.
thank you so much. Who is going to be next?
I can go. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Cavallo. I'm an educational developer and lecturer at the Center for Teaching and Learning here at UMass Amherst. I work with faculty in a variety of teaching contexts and disciplines, large to small classes, mostly in person, but also some online and hybrid classes. And in addition to consulting with faculty, a lot of what the center does here is also conduct mid-semester focus groups with students, where I get to visit a class, ask what's working really well, and also what would help their learning, and give faculty feedback right in the middle of the semester where they have time to adapt. And this means that I'm really lucky, right? I get the opportunity to work with fantastic instructors all over campus, and I also get to learn about the impacts of those fantastic teaching strategies directly from the students. So my fellow panelists today and I will talk about the motivations for active learning and share a lot of really wonderful ideas. So my goal in conversation with those ideas is really similar to how I start a lot of my consultations with faculty. Let's talk about how we actually get there to the strategies that you want to implement, right? It can feel really quite daunting to try and implement changes in our classes. We might feel some pressure to sort of reinvent, redesign, blow up the whole thing and start over, or that we don't have enough time to make some of these changes. So my refrain and kind of the answer to Slava's question is the best active learning strategies are some that are authentic to your course context and also to you as an instructor. So I'll say more about what that means in a minute and talk about how what we talk about can be helpful for that. But thank you all so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, Sarah. Colleen?
And hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Pauline Muriana. You can call me Pauline. So I'm a little bit of everywhere. And what I meant by that is that I have multiple affiliates. And one, I'm a contract instructional designer at Tulane University. So I work with their SME, creates online courses and also hybrid courses. And then I am also a lecturer at two other universities. One is at University of Tennessee at Knoxville, and also Western Kentucky University. And other than that, I've been practicing instructional design, and I also teach instructional design, and I write and also study or research about instructional design. So I try to have that all these 360 degree, not 360 degree, yes, 360 degree of instructional design, not just studying or researching, or also practicing as well, and also teach the future instructional design. So what I would love to mention is that I really hope that from today's seminar series, all of you attendees, and we're talking about active learning, right? So with the learning strategies also, and I hope you can also engage with us. It's not just about us sharing ideas as well, but we will talk about those ideas and some kind of ready to implement ideas that you can take with you for your own teaching strategies and instructional strategy. But hopefully we can also all get engaged, and we have YouTube, and also there's chat channel over there, and I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. Really impressive. And yes, I'd like to remind to our participants that this seminar will be recorded. We will be sharing the key takeaways with a video next Tuesday. So it's not like we just upload the video, but we will try to summarize this event to make your life easier. And anything that our speakers will share today, any links, we will try to also include them to our email message. So all of you who sign up for the event and indicated that you want to receive emails from us will receive this key takeaway email. All right, so we're gonna have the panel discussion. We'd like to make it more natural, and we have some questions that we prepared, and we included your questions from the registration form. And as Luke mentioned, we don't want to have this seminar as more like a theoretical, but we will start with some basic questions. I don't want really to ask this question like, what is active learning? Because I'm pretty sure that our audience really know what active learning is, but why does active learning matter? What happens to student engagement and learning outcomes when it's missing? Luke, how about you start?
So what I would say is that if you have ever taken a course before where you had a lecturer or professor just talk at you for 45 minutes and you feel like you didn't contribute a thing to the course, that's why this matters. Because we've all taken a course before, or a type of a learning experience where you're like, what did I actually learn? What did I really go through at the end of the day? And because the students were not involved in any shape, way, or form, it absolutely led to a not as great of a learning experience, not so great of a time as it possibly could be. So when thinking about how do we actually create learning experiences that are going to be meaningful, relevant, interesting, and engaging for different types of folks, it's by thinking about active learning and different types of strategies and forms of assessments and learning activities, and what we could do to really make something incredible for the folks. And that's, at the end of the day, that's why we're here, and that's why this matters.
Completely agree. And from your experience, especially because you finishing your PhD, can you maybe share your experiences? Why do you think that active learning really matters?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest problems our college students are facing today is this sense of belonging. And
Yeah.
so if you create engagement in the classroom and you create a place for your students to have a voice and some autonomy in their learning and working on projects and creating community, you begin to solve that lack of feeling of belonging, and they belong, and then they are engaged in the material. And I also think it's super important that we kind of recognize that active learning is one of the most successful ways to close that achievement gap for underrepresented populations, for our first generation college students. So it's one of the most important things that instructors can do in the classroom is create this inclusive space where we create belonging and engaging. And active learning is probably the best way to do that.
Thank you. Sarah, Pauline.
I'll jump in then maybe. Is it okay, Sarah?
Yeah,
Oh,
go
thank
for it.
you. Yeah, so I would say it does really matter, big matter actually. So I'm coming from an instructional designer head, right? So instructional design perspective, it's all about enhancing learning outcomes. And how can we do that, right? So active learning is one of them. And I see active learning from two perspectives also, of course, with the big picture of instructional design. So one perspective is from learning engagement. How can we help these students or learners to engage in behavior, something that we can see, through their performance, something that we can observe. But beyond that, how would they engage cognitively? So if they're reading something, are they just reading meaningfully or something else? And then there's also the emotional engagement. After they learn, after they see all this information, how would they feel? Is there any sense of achievement, sense of competence? So things like that. And then I also look at it from the generative learning, right? So we get a lot of these inputs of information when we're learning, and then another input of information, when we're learning. How do we process all of these inputs of information? And the way I see is that something going on in our brain, we want to process, but then it's also good for the student to generate something. So not just taking the inputs, but also generate something. And that's how I see when the students are active in their own learning.
Thank you. Sarah, want to jump in quickly?
Sure. Yeah. I guess I can take a little bit kind of riffing off of some of what other folks have said. I
Yeah.
love the idea of autonomy and competence and building that into our learning. And that's another way we can think about building some authenticity into some of the strategies we choose for active learning. So I think that's great, and happy to say more as we move on.
Perfect, thank you. And we all know that there are so many active learning strategies, but from your perspective, are there specific strategies that work better for certain disciplines or course types?
I can jump in there. So I
Sure.
think first, thinking about what active learning strategies work best for you. Again, like I said, my word of the day, you could probably count how many times I'm going to say this, is authentic, right? So the types of active learning strategies that might work best are really aligned with your course learning objectives. So they're not just kind of things that are dropped into your course, sort of just to break up lectures or to create some sort of engagement, though it is helpful in some ways to break up lectures and kind of chunk out what you want to say. So consider the types of learning goals you're working towards, the types of things you want your students to know and do. And is there a way that they can practice or build towards meeting those goals? So that's kind of the first step in thinking about what might be better for your particular discipline. Then you also want to think about what might be authentic to your discipline, your field, your community. So think about what a person in your field might do, a biologist, art historian, an informed person in the world. What are the types of situations in which someone might need to apply what they're learning in your class in the real world? So for example, maybe in a rhetoric class, you might create an activity where students, find and deconstruct a TikTok and try to identify the different strategies that those creators use in their video. So that's a way of identifying those course concepts and applying them in the real world as someone who's going to be and currently is a consumer of digital content. And then finally, of course, your strategies have to be realistic to your course context. So for example, in large classes, you bump up against some issues of scale, the number of people that you're currently teaching. So you might rely on more tech-mediated solutions, things like clickers and many other things that folks here will talk about today. But we've seen so many instructors here at UMass Amherst who have used group work, case studies, other activities in large classes, even low-tech things like using paper voting cards. So it is possible to do lots of different things in these large classes, for example.
Completely agree here because when I was a student here at UMass Amherst, the classes that I took, there were a lot of project-based learning, which required us to not only to let's say explore the content, but also I had to think about the real life projects I want to complete, right? So I've got extra skills, soft skills, because I had to understand how to work with different teams, right? So what questions I need to ask to my professor, and I really enjoyed that, to be honest. So I mean, there is no reason to think about high level technology, right? And I agree here with Sarah. It's all about learning objectives and definitely some basic active learning strategies will also work in your courses, no matter what format you guys use, in-person teaching or online teaching. And do you want to add anything?
I have a little to add. So I think when we think about which active learning strategies are better for disciplines and courses, I agree with everything Sarah said, but I would also add that not only is it important to tie it to our course goals, but we need to meet the students where they are. So what are the students interested in? One of the questions that I was asked when I interviewed for, I did accept a position here at UMass, was what do I think is the most important public health issue? And my response to that is, I think the most important public health issue is the one the student is interested in, because that is our goal into teaching. And when you have a student interested in a topic, we can create a passion project out of that. If you have a class that is very interested in a certain topic and it fits within your course goals, if you go with that, you are going to create that passion, that buy-in, that engagement, that inclusion, and autonomy over their own learning. I think that's one of the most important things that we can do is really build in some autonomy for our students.
Thank you so much. And what do you think? What are some common misconceptions about active learning that you encountered as instructors?
I have a good one that I heard just yesterday. It was one of those perfect scenarios. You know how someone always starts and they're like, oh, yesterday, this perfect scenario happened that is perfect for my talk. So that actually did happen in real life. But I'll start with another one first. So when I was thinking of misconceptions, I kind of had two in mind. I had one that I often hear from faculty and then one that I often hear from students. So I'll just talk about both of those. But first, from faculty, I often hear about the fact that active learning doesn't actually have to be loud, live, or in person, right? It certainly can be. And but I also want to acknowledge that it can be something that's silent. It can be reflective, contemplative, or even, asynchronous. And I hear from faculty that, I'm nervous to do active learning because I'm an introvert. This isn't really my type of thing that I enjoy doing. And it doesn't quite feel right. So I wanted to give a shout out to Liz Norell. She's at the University of Mississippi, and she just had a new book come out called The Present Professor, where she talks about this idea of showing up as your whole self in the classroom. And I really think that also speaks to Anne Marie's point about, allowing the students to show up, but also show up as yourself, right? And through that, you can kind of create the conditions for learning, really building a foundation of trust with your students. And that's what I mean. Also, again, here I'm saying it again, what it means to be authentic to you as an instructor. So if your teaching activities feel aligned with who you are as a person, it's much more of an open place to build a sense of connection and community in your class that can support active learning. But then my other example, what I often hear from students. So yesterday I was traveling back to the area and I heard these two students talking about their chemistry class. And one said the instructor is always talking about when we're solving problems that it's okay to be uncomfortable. And I think we can all kind of buy into that, right? Like, yes, learning is hard. It's okay to make mistakes. Yes. But then the student continues. I would be a lot more comfortable if you just taught the material. I'm here to learn chemistry, not discover chemistry. And I really think this is a perfect example of one of those common misconceptions. And anyone that has tried active learning, I'm sure has heard something like this, right? Why am I doing all the work? Shouldn't you be the one teaching us? And this has also been shown in the literature, right? Student perceptions of active learning aren't always associated with their actual learning. They're usually learning more than they think they are. And so that's my plug for kind of communicating the why of active learning and really kind of teasing out the purpose of doing these activities, because then often we might leave our students without a sense of why I'm doing this. Why is this connected to the real world? Why am I doing these problems when you could just tell me how to solve them?
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Anyone else want to jump in here?
Yeah, I'll just piggyback by saying explaining the why is always something we should do regardless. That's just a fantastic point, Sarah. No matter what, for sure, from an educational perspective. I will say too, Slava, that I have seen a couple of different examples where it was kind of interesting at first until I had to like dive in further to be able to understand more about perhaps why folks were not so keen to be able to do an active learning strategy. One example is from scenario-based learning. I've been using it for years. It's been very effective for all my courses. And I was extremely surprised when I met up with a group of instructional designers at a conference before for their university, and they're explaining about how they tried SPL and it did not work. And I remember being like, well, why didn't it work? Like, tell me more about it. And they began to explain about things. And finally, it got to the point of saying, like, can you just share with me what your scenarios look like? I'd love to actually have that perspective. And then I can perhaps give you some feedback. And I kid you not, the scenario that was about a leadership course, it basically went, here's Bob. You're Bob's manager. Bob did a bad thing. What are you going to
Yeah.
do? It was like, oh, well, I have an idea of why your scenario maybe is not going so well. It's just like, what happened? There's no creativity. There's no energy behind this. Obviously, I have no idea about the circumstances. I don't know. It seems like it was done in a rush because of how short it was. And I don't know about the budget and timing and people power. There's a lot of things that go into designing and developing a learning experience. But if you're a student and you read that, you're like, I don't care about that. And that's natural, I would assume, because you feel like the instructor didn't put in enough time, energy, and effort into it. So therefore, why should you? And that makes a lot of sense for why SPL did not work for them, because I would argue they really should try more. They should give it another chance and to be able to try that from a different capacity. Now, on the flip side, I've also seen a type of example where the institution forced the faculty to use a type of a learning strategy, going back to Sarah's point, not explaining the why behind it. And at this institution, we use challenge-based learning. And it was basically like, hey, faculty, you will be using CBL. And they kind of were like, but it doesn't fit for what I'm trying to do. And they ended up creating these really, and if you don't know what challenge-based learning is, think about it as in almost like of a type of a modification of scenario-based learning, where you have a form of a massive dilemma or a situation you're trying to be able to solve, and you have these forms of mini challenges that eventually will lead up into solving a much larger issue. It's kind of like you're taking scenario-based learning and project-based learning, and you're kind of like mashing them together into one. And this instructor who I was working with at the time was swearing up and down. She's like, it's too much. It doesn't make sense. We would work with the SME, and we would go back to some of the instructors to say, like, well, does this problem-based type work? And they're like, no, that's not in the real world. None of this applies. Like, you're just basically making this into some huge elaborate story when really that's not what people would do. And it's like, oh, so there wasn't the buy-in and Anne-Marie mentioned buy-in before. There wasn't the buy-in from the faculty of we should use challenge-based learning. And that was something that was clear to me of like, all right, we have an issue that we need to really go back and try to be able to get this buy-in, fix this, and of course to modify, to not make every single darn thing CBL, because that's just what they thought was the best case. And from the student feedback and such, and the faculty feedback, it wasn't the best route to take.
Based on my experience, when you say, hey, faculty, you'll be using this strategy, it never ends up well.
No, you need to do a lot of work to get them on board.
There's actually one really great question from our comments in YouTube. What might it look like when active learning isn't working or falling short of our goals? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think if it's not working, we're going to see it all over the students' faces, right? They're just going to be looking at us like, what is going on here? They don't understand. They're not buying in. They're not excited. They're not engaged. And I think that's how you should be able to get that immediate feedback that, the class is really just not seeing the vision of whatever active learning strategy you've initiated. And it's one of those things where sometimes you have this creative and innovative idea and you're going to bring this active learning into the classroom and it's just not working. You got to try to adjust, talk to the students. And I love the word with the authenticity. Ask them, how can we make this better? What are we going to do? How should we adjust this? What makes more sense? And then they buy in, they have some autonomy, they are engaged, and then you can adjust it to continue on. But I think immediate feedback from the students, you'll see it.
I think that's really,
Sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, I was just going to add, I think that's everything that you said is totally spot on. And also that sometimes you can actually have too much active learning. It is possible, right? Often when we introduce these smaller assignments and break up things, it can become quite a heavy cognitive load, right? There's just too much going on. They're in multiple classes. They're doing lots of other things. So it can be possible to just maybe have a little bit too much active learning. And one of the things you can do to think about that is, again, make sure that you're aligning what you're doing with your learning objectives and thinking about what are the key points in this class where it makes sense to check in with the students and get some of that feedback that Anne-Marie mentioned, right? How's this going? But also how is their learning progressing? So is it in the middle of a chapter, a module, or whatever? And then also to think about establishing a course rhythm. This is something that's especially super helpful in online and asynchronous courses, but also your in-person courses. What's the kind of flow of your course and when are we usually doing these types of activities? It really helps them kind of get a sense of what to expect and really setting those expectations. Another thing that can be helpful is the TILT framework, which is the Transparency in Teaching and Learning in Higher Ed framework by Marianne Winklemas. And it's a great place to start for thinking about, one, communicating the why, right? There's a big focus on the purpose, communicating the criteria, so what they actually have to do, and then having an opportunity for feedback and getting a sense of what do they actually need to do and figure out when they need to do it. So I think kind of taking some of those pieces and pulling them all together can be really helpful for knowing what went wrong and why.
Yeah, I would like to add. So, as Anne-Marie and Sarah, I love your insights over there. So, I want to piggyback and also add a little bit to that. So, what Anne-Marie said also, you will be able to see it from your students' face, when if something is not engaging or if they're not being engaged. So, the same thing also you can observe on your online course, whether it's asynchronous or synchronous. So, let's say it's synchronous. I know a lot of folks thinks, oh, active learning, we need to do a lot of discussion boards, right? I mean, discussion boards or having online discussions is not bad. It's really not bad. But it's also about how you frame the question, how you ask the question, and what kind of question that you want to ask to your students in the online discussions, right? So from there, you can also observe like how the interactions are, how the student can reply one to another, and things like that. So if you see something, it's being quiet, students are being quiet on your online discussion, you can jump in, do some kind of intervene to ask more question and then give them hints or something. And then I have another one, but I just lost my thought. Oh, yes, I remember. So it's also back about what your learning goals, your course goals, and also the learning objective. And this is coming from my experience years ago when the term student generated content term was popular. This is like years ago, and we had a faculty coming and then talking, oh, I just want the students to create video. And back then there was no smartphone that you could use to take video, so students would have to borrow one of those digital camcorder kind of thing that using the cassette, and then you have to take out the cassette and put it onto your computer and then use Adobe Premiere, right? Things like that. So, and then like we're thinking, okay, I mean, it's good if we could see the output, students creating something out of what they have learned. But and then now let's think, what would be the learning? What are the learning objective here? Because it would take a lot of time for the students just to learn the pre-production and also production and post-production at that time. So again, active learning, go back to your learning goal and then try to align it. And then again, it's from instructional design perspective.
Thank you so much. Well, I know that Sarah mentioned a couple of models. We discussed that it's really critical to think about your learning objectives. But let's just imagine that we have new instructors here, right? New to active learning. Where is the best place to start? What are some simple strategies with a high impact? Luke.
So I would say to start is to not be afraid of experimenting because you're talking with a bunch of educators right here on Zoom who have done this for a number of years. And I promise you have also failed. And you don't see that. Right now, you're seeing about how I was talking about this. But when thinking about, when I mentioned scenario-based learning before, and I'll stick with that one again, a tried, true, tested method I've been using for a very long time. My first scenarios were awful. I promise you, if I go back and I read those now, I would cringe and I would hide underneath my desk because I can't believe students looked at that. Yeah, but that was something I was trying to do and seeing if it would resonate with folks. And then, as you heard from a couple of moments ago, collecting student feedback, adding their voice back into my classes and figuring out how to make those better every single time. But that all just came from trying and starting. The other method that Slava you mentioned before too, but definitely is another one that I strongly advocate for is a PBL for project-based learning, where you're taking a type of a larger project and trying to be able to break that down into smaller milestones. And the point about that is that this way you're going to have more instructor to student type of engagement. So if they are going to be, let's say they're creating, you're teaching a type of a web design course, and by the end of it, the students are going to be able to launch a fully new and amazing type of a website. Well, we can break that down into smaller parts and pieces of things, from the wireframing, understanding more about colors and schemes, to being able to create the types of buttons, trying to use a certain type of tool, and eventually put it all together and you have a website. Well, you don't want them just to do that all at once and then to be able to submit a website without any form of a feedback. You want those types of interactions to be able to go back and forth with the students, to be able to give them that type of insight, to be able to say that, like, oh, you were close, but what if we made this type of a tweak and tuning instead? And eventually you keep on doing this, and by the end, they have a fantastic type of a website where I promise you, if they just tried their own on the first shot and then they submitted you something, it's definitely not as effective. And they want to be able to hear more from your feedback and trying to be able to add in those elements. Like, that's why they're there to learn, is to hear your feedback and then to put them back into everything and try to figure out the very best that they can do. So overall, just don't be afraid of trying. You're going to fail. That's a part of it. It's experimenting, but students will absolutely at least appreciate that you're trying and that you're not just doing the tried and true traditional way of online learning, which has essentially been reading, video, discussion board, essay, submit that 8 times in a row, and boom, the course is done. So they will appreciate you trying something different.
So we discussed a couple of different formats like project-based, scenario-based. Maybe if you can share some examples. We have a really great question here from Jeannie. What are good strategies or activity examples that can make online discussion activities more engaging and interactive? So if you can share some examples, that would be great, so that our audience can grab these examples and start trying this with their teaching.
I can start maybe, Slava, yeah?
Sure.
All right. And I'm excited also to be able to hear more insights from our fellow panels here. But here's from some of my experience, right? I'll talk about discussion board a little bit later, but I do, in my assignments, I allow the students to express their ideas or submission in multiple format, in modality, to all different multi modalities, right? So I give them choices. Here again, somebody mentioned about learner choices before. I think it was Anne-Marie or Sarah, maybe Luke also. So I give them choices, and of course, I give them guiding questions, right? So I ask them, we got some readings here and also some video that we watch, as part of our module content. So now I ask them to analyze and then synthesize, but and then not just synthesize and just write an essay just like that. But I give them choices. Yes, you can write an essay if that's your choice, but you can also express it in creating a short video, 1 minute video. It's okay. There's tons of tools out there to create videos, right? And then I allow them to use template. That's fine. And then I also allow them to create a concept map or even mind map if you want to express it that way. And also maybe infographic. And then I allow the student to choose any of this format. And I was impressed with a lot of types of infographic and also mind map. And also some actually, believe me, some students do choose to write essays. So writing is still a thing. Yes. Yeah. So I feel that because I work with adult learners a lot and they love to be in charge of their own learning process. And when you give them learner choices, they will take it over there and then there you go, active. And then they can become active also in their own learning process. About discussion board, I use different types of prompting also, like the discussion prompt. So usually I ask them something that is relevant, that's coming from their own experience. Sometimes in my class, I have like all different people from different background. Some are teachers already who have been teaching, and then some of them are already in the industry. Some of them are coming from another field. I have students from like dental hygiene field and things like that. So when I ask question about our topic and put it in the discussion, I ask them to bring, what their perspective coming from their own field or background. And I was impressed. A lot of people actually love to talk about what they have done, what they love in their own field or in, at their own work. All right. So, and I would love to hear from my fellow panelists here.
And how about you?
So I'm not a big user of discussion boards. I haven't been able to figure that out creatively. So maybe I can share a simple strategy where, high impact. So it's something I'm going to be piloting in the fall, and I want to empower all of the instructors to get out of your own departments and collaborate with people across campus, because this is the real world and this is what our students will have to do. They're going to have to work with lots of different, disciplines. And I think if you collaborate with another instructor, you're kind of taking a little bit of that ownership or off yourself and developing a partnership. So for example, my idea is I teach a public health course, and my students have to choose a health topic, and then they have to create an intervention. And part of this intervention also includes creating a media campaign. Well, if we look at things like, departments of public health, they hire marketing specialists, advertising specialists, social media specialists. So why not reach across the aisle to, let's say, the Eisenberg Business School and say, hey, your students have to create an advertising campaign. Well, why don't your students and my students talk? So my students are going to create a creative media brief. Her students are going to do the marketing research. Who is the population? Who does this health campaign need to reach? They're going to look at, the money end and all the things that they would need to do for marketing and advertising. And then together, collaboratively, they'll make a joint media campaign. So two classes, two very different topics coming together to work collaboratively. And it takes a little bit of that pressure off of the instructor to get it right the first time, because now there's two of you, and the two of you are working this together and you're bouncing ideas off of each other. And now the students are engaging because now they're excited to work with a whole new department. And that is the real world. Our students are going to have to reach across the aisle and collaborate with other people. I don't know how to work that into a discussion board yet, though. I'm sorry.
There is actually, it is really actually a great example. So hopefully someone knows that globally there is a really great school, coding school, which is a School 42. and they have really great teaching style. There are no teachers there. There are no faculty. So basically, what students have to do, they are presented with a task to develop, I don't know, to develop a website or to develop the app. And this task is aligned with a specific topic, right? They have to talk to each other to find out how to solve this problem, right? So they will teach each other, especially because, computer science, some IT developers, they are really introverts. They don't want to talk to each other. So it's a really great point that this way, not only we teach them how to code effectively, but how to talk to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to find out solution together to develop task, and then also before the submitting the task to the school administrators, they need to submit this task to other students so they can double check before they submit this task to the computer system. So this way, we teach people how to interact with each other and how to find more new information. And this also helps to develop some soft skills, communication skills, right? And there's another example. There is a really great tool, and I think that a lot of faculty know that this tool exists, Miro boards. So you can actually create a lot of activities in Miro and make students collaborate, right? So you can, let's say, one of the examples, you can create icebreakers there, right? So students can complete cards there and then share with each other like what they feel about the class or what they feel about the topic. And another example, let's say they can collaborate together on a specific project, right? So you can create different boards where you can make students brainstorm together on the problem, right? Then you can create another board where they can brainstorm different solutions, and then they can have discussion over Zoom, right? So there was a question. The reason I'm saying the mirror because there was a question how to what active learning strategies to use for asynchronous courses. So this is one of the examples. Use this tool that is called Miro.
I can also jump in with some ideas for how to get started in active learning, which I think some of these questions can be helpful for discussion boards. I think there's a lot of really interesting tools out there that can kind of do something similar to what Pauline was mentioning, right? Bringing multiple different types of discussions. So video paired with audio, paired with text, social annotation tools. There's a lot of things out there that I think can really complement some of the discussion board conversation that we've had. But I also want to add some sort of like framing questions to maybe think about as you're getting started in active learning. And definitely echoing what Luke said about experimentation. Iterating on something is always the best strategy. So trying and then trying again and kind of like slowly tinkering at these things. And because we're already kind of well on our way to thinking about active learning strategies by aligning them with our context, aligning them with our objectives and ourselves, there are so many active learning strategies out there that it's probably very overwhelming, right? And so kind of focusing on those filters can help us pick some strategies with the most meaningful impact. And then from there, I also encourage you to think of a pinch point, a common pinch point. So that's something that you come up against, that you and your students come up against when you're working towards your learning goals. So that might be something like you're not sure whether your students understood the main point of your lecture, or you're not sure that they actually got key takeaways from your reading that you wanted them to get. Or maybe they feel pretty reluctant to participate in class. So it's often, kind of hearing crickets, not hearing a lot from your students. Or maybe they didn't perform as well in that exam as you had hoped. So pick one pinch point. It's often tempting to try to solve everything at once. This is blanket permission to not do that. Just pick one. And after you've picked one, I encourage you to check out this resource. They're called CATs. That's classroom assessment techniques. Many of you might be familiar with those, but they're incredibly straightforward strategies. They're low prep, they're evidence-based, and they're designed to solve a lot of those concerns, those questions I raised earlier, right? And they're really adaptable to a variety of course contexts, so you can kind of tailor them to you and your course. So if you aren't sure what your students are getting out of lecture, you might introduce a few clicker questions throughout the content. Or if you have like recorded lectures, you can introduce questions throughout your videos to make sure they're on the same page and getting what you want out of it. Or perhaps you have students do a close reading together in a group to help them understand what they're meant to get out of the reading, to kind of really dive into that skill of close reading. Or you might have students take a minute to write something on a piece of paper or kind of journal or something to kind of prepare a response to a discussion question to help them collect their thoughts before they feel like they have to participate in a whole group discussion. Kind of gives them some motivation. They have something to say before they have to say it. Or you might have them complete an exam wrapper. So that's a strategy where after they get their test back, give them a chance to reflect on how they did, what they got wrong, and how they might do differently next time. So in the chat, I have shared a link. Hopefully, a link will be shared to resources from our webpage, the UMass Amherst CTL, which has a lot more resources and ideas about how to get started with a few of these different CAT techniques and a couple of other evidence-based strategies that are pretty similar. So I encourage you to check those out. My wonderful colleagues and I have put together a variety of videos about these things. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, we will be sharing these links, and also as a reminder, we will be sending all the links next Tuesday, but we will be sending our key takeaways email to all our participants. And now I can see this link in the chat.
Slava, can I jump in with one more part about discussions?
Absolutely, sure.
So another part about discussions, when you think of a discussion board, I know it's you're instantly locked into like one mode of thinking because we've all experienced discussions that are very simple of like, do you agree? Do you disagree? Comment by Thursday, respond to 2 peers by Sunday. So here's what you do to make it more interesting from that type of perspective is that we can combine discussion boards with other types of learning strategies to not just be the exact same old, same old. For instance, we talked about a couple of them already, but people don't use them inside of a discussion board format. So let's take, for instance, a case study. Most people think of case studies and they think about, oh, it has to be a type of a long form paper. It needs to be an essay submission. Not necessarily. Like we can make a case study into a discussion board. Same thing of a scenario-based problem and turning that way into side of there, or using a simulation and then having the folks talk about that on the discussion board. It doesn't need to always be the exact same thing. The other thing that I have found too with teaching different types of courses, which makes it more impactful from a discussion perspective, is that my courses always have like a cohort. So it's always a cohort-based model. You always have 20 to 30 students going through it at a time. What I do is that I then group them from that cohort into a type of a mini cohort. So they are assigned discussion boards that only they can see in groups of like 4 or 5. And it makes the discussions much more vibrant or organic and engaging because now you're not just talking to 30 people at once, you're talking to your 4 people. And if they are constantly speaking with one another week over week, or if you're doing like a type of a optional live session over Zoom, or if they see each other face to face, you start to be able to notice that their bonds form a lot more. And now they're much more talkative to one another. And then that way you combine that with like a type of a technique like think, pair, share, where if you're trying to be able to put them inside a Zoom for their breakout rooms and you match them into their mini cohort, they're just going to keep on talking more and more. And then by the end of your course, they are best friends. They just love talking with one another. And now your discussion boards are never quiet because they know one another, which for an online course perspective can feel very odd if you don't know people and you don't have a proper way of introducing yourself for a networking event and meeting people. And that's one way I found to really kick the dialogue up like several notches is by doing that.
Thank you. Well, still, what I noticed from the examples that we are sharing now, most of them will cover synchronous courses. But let's think about those asynchronous courses where we don't have this opportunity to connect students over Zoom, right? And let's say it's just one person open this either Canvas course or Articulate Storyline course. What do we do? How can we make this course more engaging, based on some active learning strategies? And look, I recall that you mentioned scenario-based learning, right? Branching scenarios, maybe something else.
I mean,
Any ideas?
Everything I've said so far applies to asynchronous content. The only thing that doesn't apply is what I just said about the optional Zoom webinar. Other than that, scenario-based learning, project-based learning, gamifications, simulation, having the type of the mini cohorts, that all still applies to online learning. There really is not as much of a difference as you might be thinking about. And I know that if you Google active learning strategies, all of them come up from like a synchronous fashion, but it all still applies, whether it's going to be case studies or narratives or journals or whatever you're going to polls, like they're all still the same way from that type of perspective. So you can make any of those things work. And even if there is something that you think can only be done run, I'll give you an example inside of a live version, let's say with polls. When I teach types of online courses that are synchronous in nature, I'll have like a poll everywhere, and I want students to be able to vote on something, and they'll do like a word cloud, and you can see all that information. But what if I want to be able to take a type of a poll, and let's say that students are going to be watching a video, and then halfway through the video, the professor asks a question, and then the poll will pop up inside of Canvas about voting for option A or B. And then that way they can vote on that and then take that and then go into the discussion board following that, explaining why they voted for option A or B. So there's always a way to kind of flip it into a different way. Don't be forced to feel like because you're only reading about it in a certain style means that you can't do it in one modality versus another. We talked about the Sarah, your authentic word comes to mind for this one, to borrow that from you, where it does have to feel authentic and not like square peg, round hole kind of a thing. You really need to make sure it's going to be something that is organic and does make a lot of sense for your students to be able to go through. And there are many ways of being able to flip them.
And I think something else I'll add to that, Luke, is also making sure that whatever they're doing, whatever that activity is, that you're bringing it back around to the other parts of their class, right? So if you're communicating with the students regularly, bring what they're sharing in those different spaces into your regular kind of course communication, because then it feels more like a community, right? So talking about building those connections with students, but that also is part of what you're doing as the instructor as well. So I think that that's a really, really important point. So thanks for sharing that.
And I have a question, actually, Pauline. I think you might want to cover that. So there was actually a question from our audience who sent us this question through the registration forum. A lot of faculty members are so used to relying on their in-person presence for teaching. How can an instruction designer best help faculty translate their in-person presence and engagement into an online setting?
All right. I think we touched upon a little bit about that, right? And then Luke also mentioned, it also applies for asynchronous. So from in-person to online setting, right? I would, well, as an instructional design person, right? I think a lot about, let's look at your learning objective first, so we go from there first, what your learning objective first, and then what kind of assessment we want to do that, so that way we can help students achieve their learning objective. So I start from over there and then figure out the learning activities. So here again, we have heard people talking about, from in-person to online, let's just convert everything. Let's just put my PowerPoint all Canvas. Let's step back. Hang on, let's step back. So online courses, there are some strategies also, and there's some framework over there. And when I think about online learning or trying to figure out about online learning strategies, I think of this community of inquiries. Can I promote my teaching presence? Can I promote social presence? How I can interact with students and how students can interact each other. And I go from over there. And then there's also how can I promote cognitive presence, through my whether it's content or my learning material. So I go from over there and I try to embed all of that in all of the learning activities in my online courses. And then I know we've been talking about online discussion, right? Or discussion board, in class, we can always ask question and then ask student, and we can see the students, face reaction when they answer a question or if they're clueless. And I know it's hard to do that in online courses. So now let me talk about discussion board again, because we've been talking about it. So sometimes in discussion board, I allow students to do this way. I allow them to write their own answer, their own post, okay, but they don't post it right away. And then I allow them to go to AI, Gen AI. It could be whatever their preferred Gen AI, whether it's ChatGPT or Copilot, and then ask also with the same question that I give them in the online discussion, and then I have them compare, compare between their own answer and then the output given by the Gen AI, and then post it on discussion board. And I got a lot of impressive posts from students. And here's my answer. And then this is the prompt that I used. And I did the prompt twice or three times. I iterated because I felt I did not get enough output. And then they posted it over there. And then they also shared the output itself. And then they mentioned, oh my gosh, there's something that I did not think of. And then Gen AI pointed out, but then on the other hand, also, it did not talk about whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then now it makes me think, let's say if we're talking about diversity and inclusion, and then now with all this output from Gen AI, how does Gen AI actually define, or where is the definition from, about the diversity and inclusion? What is it based on? What kind of data sources? There you go. And then it just triggered more comments, from their peers. So that would be my answer for now, and I'll add more if I have more ideas. Thank you, Slava.
Thank you. We actually have a really cool questions from our audience in the chat, and actually we are moving to this technology and tool category questions. So, what tools or technologies have helped you foster deeper engagement in your courses? And I mean, you can we touch base on specific tools like Gen AI tools, Miro. Maybe you can also think about your tools you are using in your class and share some examples. Because another question I can see here in the YouTube comment section is that I have wanted to use polls in my course design, but I don't have a good polling platform with live results. Have you gotten around this? So let's discuss different tools that we can use.
You want me to jump in since I was the one talking about polls? Okay, so Poll Everywhere is one of the ones that I mentioned about a couple minutes ago. You can also use Kahoot, and you can use even Qualtrics. You can do a ton of different ways. Google Forms. I mean, you don't need to overthink it if you want to be able to add more in from that type of perspective. From a tool perspective, beyond just polls that I have really been dabbling more and more with, has been creating custom GPTs. So if you have GPT-4 from OpenAI, and that's the subscription one that costs like $19 a month or whatever it is, you can create your own type of a custom GPT and to include that inside of your courses. So I've experimented with that in a couple of different ways. One of them, for a course that I teach about instructional design for, I create a custom GPT that's called Your UDL Pal. And the idea was that I wanted educators to be able to upload the different types of assessments and assignments, and then to be able to see from a UDL lens, did everything actually make sense, or is there another angle that someone could be thinking about from that type of perspective? And it was really interesting to see other types of educators and instructors and teachers and designers go through and upload their creations and then saying like, oh, I never thought about it from this perspective. And it's like, yeah, it's the point of a tool and why I created it. So you can create custom GPTs now easier than ever, where when I was first creating them a couple of years ago, there was a whole bunch of steps and processes, and now you can make one in like 5 seconds because of course the tools are getting better, which is great to be able to have from that type of perspective. You can also create something too, like for one of the instructional design courses, I have the instructional design interview coach, where some of my IDs wanted to be able to practice interviewing before actually applying for real instructional design jobs. So same thing, I created it, and based off of a couple of different types of questions that I put into that one, that's how I was trained on that data. And then from there, it would walk students through going through different forms of interview questions. And at the end, it would actually give them a grade based around how they performed inside of the quote unquote interview for things. So that was cool to be able to have as well, and trying to be able to incorporate more technology into the classroom for students to be able to see Gen AI in a different type of capacity, maybe than what they actually had thought of. Of course, you can use different forms of simulations as well. And now, once again, with Gen AI, it's even easier to create simulations compared to what they were years ago. But I still use a ton of simulations from Harvard Business Publishing, or a bunch of different ones I use for leadership courses and a few finance courses and things like that. But those are a few tools that come to mind right away.
Thank you. Anyone else want to share their tools that they're using?
Sure. So I am just a big believer in meeting the students where they are, and all of our students are on social media. They're using TikTok and Instagram, and how do we bring those things into the classroom? They're also using memes. We can do a lot of stuff with memes. That's just fun. But I bring social media into my classroom, almost all my classes, in two main ways. The first way is, this is how the students and a lot of people now are getting their news. They're not reading a newspaper or watching the nightly news. Those days are kind of gone. So we can do like a health misinformation, because The internet is full of lots of misinformation, so they can find me a TikTok, find out why it's misinformation, and then bring me the scientific literature to show me that it's misinformation. So that's one way. The other thing that I do that has just become wildly popular with my classes is they create an Instagram page where the students become the teacher. So I do have an Instagram up. I can give a link that can go out. It's called Squirrely Stats, where we take the statistics from the squirrel census in New York City, and we can do a lot with that to see how green spaces create health disparities. But it is a fun way that students they learn a ton of skills. They can set up an Instagram page. They make all the graphics. You got to think about the design. You have to think about how you are going to communicate in just a few sentences, creating that post. What about the funny hashtags? What are we doing? How are we buying engagement to everybody else? How are people finding this page? It's creative, it's innovative. The student becomes the teacher, and then they have a living, breathing thing that they can choose to continue on developing if they want to, or it can kind of sit there as a product of their work, and then hopefully teaching others. And this is a great way for micro learning because that is really what social media is. We would hope it is, right? These opportunities for some micro learning. So our students become the teacher and teach in these short 8-second bouts, which is about where our attention span is now, small micro learning moments. So I'm just a big believer in figuring out where the students are, what technology are they using, and then let's take it and figure out how to bring it into the classroom in a creative, fun, innovative way because they're automatically going to buy into it and they'll figure out how to make the project even better for the next semester is what's usually that's what I've been seeing. So social media, big fan.
Thank you. Look, we have actually a follow-up question for you. Could you clarify what do you mean by simulations?
Yep, of course. So think of different types of simulations are going to be really incorporating technology into some type of a tool that's going to be walking students through click by click or page by page or step by step. So in one case, you can Google one simulation. It's called the change management simulation. It's one of the courses that we deploy this form of a simulation tool at MIT, where the whole idea around it is that you are going to be a leader at an organization and you're trying to be able to lead a change initiative through that organization, and based around your actions and your types of interactions with other employees at the organization is going to determine if your initiative is going to go through or not. And just like within the real world where sometimes your interactions with other people are negative and it doesn't really go so well, that does impact things and it sets your initiative back by so many weeks or so many months. And of course, on the reverse of that one, if everything does go well and you do everything correctly, then that way your initiative is going to go through. Now, part of a simulation is that you have to be able to push and pull different types of levers and see exactly what type of action item are you going to dictate to which people, and then seeing the results of that one. So if you're trying to be able to lead a change initiative at work, you can host a town hall meeting, you can set up a mentorship program, you can send out a bunch of emails or start up like different types of campaigns. And depending upon what you pick and choose, will then give you different forms of results. So that form of a simulation is an idea that you're trying something out inside of this safe space where it's okay to fail before you go lead a change initiative at your real job, and then you have all this type of pushback. So we want people to be able to try and do this inside of a form of this technological space, as opposed to trying something out in the real world. So it could be something like with that. It could like be with negotiating, where if you have never negotiated before and you want to be able to go back and forth in that type of case, I created one for students who are trying to be able to buy a car for the first time. So we had a simulation as far as we're saying, here's how to negotiate, because buying a car is really intimidating. And for some people, they dread it, which has created different types of organizations who have now created ways for you to not have to talk with anyone. And you can buy a car online because it's that intimidating and that unappealing to be able to go through. So there's a number of simulations you can use, but those are just a few that come to mind.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to revisit the question about the different polling tools. I mean, there are so many of them, right? So Luke mentioned Kahoot. There's really great another tool, Slido, Poll Everywhere. You can also use Google Forms, right, for that. The only thing I'd like to suggest is maybe to check in with your either IT department or maybe your institution has instructional media lab because they know what tools you can use because sometimes it's all about the personal data and some security issues that might happen. So before you want to use different tools, please check in. Please check in with your IT department first, because this is really cool. Because we can name a lot of tools here, but maybe your institution will block this tool, right? And maybe it might be illegal to use it.
Or it could save you money
Oh,
because
sorry.
they already have licenses and you don't know. And then you're like, oh,
Exactly,
I don't need to
exactly.
buy this because I already have it. So yeah, sorry, Pauline, didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, 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 no. It's good. It's good. So I just want to add something, Slava, and I hope it doesn't sound silly because it's going to go really simple. Let's look
Nothing
at where
sounds
we
silly here.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. So let's look at where we are right now. What platform are we using, right? And I'm also looking at the YouTube live right now and look at the chat here. Look at
Yeah.
not all of you, like many of you actually put your chat over there asking question and then sharing your ideas and also comments, right? So there you go, chat. If you're using Zoom, why not using chat, right? That's all. Sounds simple.
We actually have a really great question, and I mean, I'd like to ask this to every each of you. So, because this is more like personal experience, right? What are the biggest mistakes you've made when implementing active learning, and what did you learn from them? Oh, this is a tough one, right? Who wants to start?
I'll go. I have no problem admitting my mistakes. I made a lot, so I will happily go first. So someone mentioned it previously about talking about doing too many. And that
Yeah.
is absolutely possible. So, one of the things that I did not take into account before when designing learning experiences is that I am not the target audience. I already have a prior background in something that I am designing or something that I'm going to be teaching. And because of that, I did not think about how long people would be going through certain types of things. This could be in a number of elements as far as for saying that like they're learning from step 1 and perhaps I'm already at step 5, or in other cases I did not write my instructions clearly enough for things. So for one of the courses, and we do pilot programs, which I'm very thankful for launching courses to get that student feedback early on, was that I created this type of a reflection assignment that was at the end of every single week. What we know best from learning science is that we want students to be able to stop, pause, think, and reflect back to what they just went through. So I asked people to be able to do reflections and to write essentially their reflection for everything for the week. Now, in the instructions, I did not put a minimum or a maximum length of how much I wanted to write. And that was a big mistake because I had some folks who were writing 2 sentences and others who were saying that it was taking them all night to be able to do their assignment because they were writing 15 pages. And it's like, oh, so because of that, when I was asking people about how long did you spend inside of the course for the week, and I would hear these radically different answers of 2 hours and 20 hours, it was like, what happened? No one should be spending 20 hours in week 1 of this course. And then come to find out from looking at the assignments, it was like, oh, I messed that up. So trying to make sure that I have clear instructions for what I am doing and not just adding a strategy after strategy after strategy. Like there's a time and a
Mhm.
place to be able to say this needs to be in this manner, and then hey, now we can be creative and innovative and try to be able to add in more. And one of the things that Pauline mentioned about from like using Chat GPT that now we do have, which is fantastic, is that I will take a type of an assignment and I will put the forms of the instructions inside of Chat GPT, and I will say, read this and then tell me where is something inside of here confusing that a student would get stuck
Mhm.
on and how can I fix it? And that has been a game changer. Things that I would never think about and be like, oh, yep, I can easily see how that would happen. Because once again, I'm not the target audience. So I would have never thought about it like that.
I would
Thank
go
you.
next, please. Slava, is it okay? Because it's similar.
Absolutely.
It's all, well, yeah, it's similar. I made a mistake about not clearly, what is it? articulate my expectation. So not having clear instructions. So that was one mistake, and the students were confused. Wait, what do you want us to do? So, okay, so how long is it gonna be? Or how far, how deep should I go with this assignment? So now I have rubric almost everywhere, and I try to be clear in my rubric, what I would love to see in the excellent criteria here, excellent criteria or excellent rating here, and then what it means, if you're in the middle here, what it means over there. And when I do rubric, I always share the highest point possible because I would love my students to aim high, the highest. So I use rubric instead of just writing the instruction only.
I really like these examples because I had the opposite problem, which was that my instructions were way too long. And I found myself eventually, I had these assignments kind of speaking to what tools I use. I often try to reflect on sort of open educational resources, so things that are available for everyone to use and to think about as maybe like data. So we've used sort of oral history recordings and things like that. And I've also asked students in different polling technologies to kind of be data collectors and data creators. So in those assignments, I wrote these very detailed, very long instructions, and I found myself actually writing more than the students needed to write for this entire assignment, just, to get what I wanted from them. And I think what all of us have been kind of talking about is finding that balance where you're kind of like, you're building the sandbox, right? You want them to be able to do something within this contained context, but you also want them to be able to have the creativity to build whatever they want to build and have that curiosity that I think Pauline was talking about earlier. So yeah, trying to find that balance is tricky, but I've definitely been on both sides of too much and too little information.
So for me, I think I made two really big mistakes where the first thing is when I had an active learning, it was a Socratic debate. And, I presented this assignment exactly how it was designed, exactly how it's supposed to work. And the students just didn't buy it. And I was not willing to adjust. This was the first time I did it. I'm like, no, we're doing this. And I didn't adjust. And I didn't give them any voice. I also didn't give them a voice. They had no autonomy in this. And, after a lot of self-reflection and admittedly some crying over the winter break, I came back and I said, you know what? I have to build trust with these students is really the first thing. I need to build trust and inclusion. And if an assignment is just not landing the way you think it's going to land, it is okay to stop and it is okay to adjust it because that's just making it better. And it's giving the student some voice, that active learning collaboration. So I think building the trust, being willing to adjust and adapt as needed, and admitting your mistakes. When the students see that you can simply admit, okay, it's not landing, they're learning a valuable lesson about failure and trying again and working collaboratively to making it better. So build that trust and give them some voice and adjust, which can be hard, but it's possible.
I think another mistake that people might make is using the active learning because someone else was telling them to use active learning, right? Because, especially right now when you go to different conferences and you hear this buzzwords like gamification or like metaverse or VR, people feel stressed about that. They kind of want to use them, but or maybe they like Luke, like you mentioned 20 minutes ago. Um, just admin stuff, just ask faculty, now you will be using this. Well, this is a really a bad mistake, a terrible mistake, I would say. And I like the way how Sarah mentioned that if you can align your active learning strategy to learning objectives, this is the right way how you can use this. Don't just follow the buzzwords. I mean, it's really great to read articles. It's really great to attend the seminars like our idea seminar. We can share best practices, but it doesn't necessarily mean that whatever we mentioned here, you have to use those active learning strategies specifically in your classes. Think about why you're using this, how it support your student, right? How it support the learning objective. Because I see there's one comment, and I think we definitely need to comment on that. There is a comment from Jason I'm worried about student buy-in for asynchronous learning. I see many students that just want a very transactional, classic, write a paper, write a post course. How do you sell active learning to students? Sarah, what is your suggestion here?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one of the things that you can start to think about is really what Anne-Marie has been saying, which is building in that choice and that autonomy. So what's the thing that motivated them to be interested in the reason that they're taking that class in the first place. So they might be taking it for a variety of reasons, but there's some sort of motivation that they can use that to explore an interest that they've never had a chance to explore before. Or it might be useful for their job that they might need to develop something for a portfolio as they're applying for jobs. Or it might be something that is really meaningful to their community that they want to contribute to. So trying to think about what in your course can help contribute to their authentic learning and their authentic experience of the world. So I think a lot of what Anne-Marie has said about building in that choice, but also that autonomy. So allowing them to show up in whatever way might make sense for them in terms of the format of that assignment, or the method of presenting that content. So again, when you're thinking about the rubrics that Pauline mentioned, think about what exactly would demonstrate that learning, and does it matter that it needs to be in a particular format? So does it matter that it needs to be a paper, or can it be something else? Can it be a dance recital? Can it be a concert? Can it be a podcast? So kind of having some flexibility in terms of all of those things. And also, again, I'm really just saying what Anne-Marie already said, but in a just slightly different way, but building that community as well, right? So having a space where it feels like you feel safe to try and experiment with different ideas. So modeling that as an instructor, being not afraid to admit your mistakes, but also building that time to build trust. So when you build the groups, like Luke mentioned in your courses, when you have them in those sort of smaller discussion boards, have some opportunities for them to learn about each other or to talk and make those groups based on common interests or common goals. So they have an opportunity to build some norms where they work together. So I think there's a couple of different ways you can kind of build that buy-in, but it's, yeah, those three things: choice, autonomy, and kind of how they relate to each other.
I'm actually trying to take as many questions as I can from the chat, and there is another one really great question. I think we kind of answered that, but we can definitely repeat, right? Because are there any examples in improving active learning in courses where the content requires educators to explain the foundation and make it more interesting and less dry?
Can I
Great
repeat
answer, might be.
Anne-Marie's answer before? She talked about, Anne-Marie talks about social media, right? So we can have students actually maybe create sort of like a summary or key points,
Yeah.
and can use a short video like in a TikTok style, things like that, and then post it on social media, or maybe create a meme that is sort of like related or as a reaction, their reaction to that whatever foundation, what is it, foundation topics that they learn. So there are several ways. So that's one, using multimodality, whether it's video or maybe even have students, recreate something like an infographic. We did talk about it, and that's my favorite strategy also. And yeah. I would go from there first, and then I'll let my fellow panelists share their insights and experience.
I can jump in a tiny bit. I think, what Pauline and Sarah are really, they're hitting on is traditionally, students have been asked to demonstrate their knowledge via a test, a PowerPoint presentation, or a written paper. And that's wonderful for some students, but it's not wonderful for all students, especially when we start thinking about our neurodivergent students and including them. And are there other ways to demonstrate learned knowledge? And when you're thinking about those courses where you're, the 100 level courses, the foundational courses, or the 200 level, where you're really getting the key concepts. Well, why can't they write me a children's book to demonstrate these core concepts? Why can't they write me a comic book? Why are there not other ways that they can demonstrate that they have learned some of the foundational information on this topic other than a written paper or other than a PowerPoint or a traditional exam. Now, those things have their places. They certainly do. There's some foundational knowledge that we simply have to memorize and understand and learn. But there are other ways to demonstrate what they have learned. And I think when you do that, you give them a little bit of a choice. I think one of the best things professors can do is give the students, one or two choices in how they're going to do their final or do their midterm or what does it look like, giving them a little bit of choice. I think that is one of the most powerful things you can do. And I think it works very well for some of those foundational courses.
Thank you. Well, we now move into this last section of our discussion. Let's think about the future. And this is a quick question, I guess, for everyone. What future trends or emerging technologies do you see shaping active learning in the next few years? Well, AI, right? Anything else?
I want to give you an answer if it's not AI, but of course I want to answer with AI. So that's really nice and annoying. So Slava, I'll answer it with using AI, but in a different type of a way. So when I think more about from the future of learning, one of the things that we've been hearing about from a long time, you mentioned about how like we're constantly pitched new ideas that are going to be fixing education. We've mentioned
Mm,
micro learning. We talked about XR, VR, AR, and the metaverse. There's of course flipped classroom model, and yeah, there's always different ways that are going to be like the magical fix to education, and everything is great, but nothing's like the obviously the magical fix of things. One of them has been the concept of personalized learning and adaptive learning and mashing that together. And now we actually have ways of being able to do that where before it would take so long from a people power perspective that it didn't make sense to do. So when I think about where perhaps we are going to be going, let's say that we are going to be creating like professional development courses and we want folks to be able to go through something. Let's say that when they are starting off, they can select where they are currently at with how much they know about this current topic. As they move through with everything, if they find that it's too difficult for them to be able to do, what they can then do is select a different type of a learning track that would then open up a type of a more, I don't want to say easier, but like a less intimidating version of the types of topics that have been generated now with Gen AI to be able to have more types of content and learning activities and such based around the same theme, but spun in a different way. One of the common phrases that we say if an instructional design working with subject matter experts, and if we do not understand what they are saying, is explain it to me like I'm five. Like you're here, you gotta drop way down here because I do not know where we're going. And if we take a concept, whatever it is, we can then have those different types of learning tracks of like an easy, medium, and hard version, if you will. And depending upon the student, because some, of course, there are always going to be those who are the ones who are going to try to get straight A's and they're the perfectionists. And if they want to go down the amazing, complicated path, you can absolutely do so. But for someone who struggles, well, why don't we kind of like flip that? Let's reverse it for them and give them a type of a real opportunity to be able to get to that right level, and then they can kind of jump ahead. So that's really taking different types of learning strategies with AI, kind of putting them on steroids, but being able to do this in a just different type of way. And before, that was like a dream. It was never going to happen. It
mhm.
was way too hard to be able to do. And I can do it now within seconds. And that's astonishing to be able to see. So of course, you can't just take it at face value. You got to review everything. There needs to be the Q&A and such for everything. Don't just take AI at what it does and say it's perfect and then use it. That's not the right way of doing things. But that's something that I feel like we can get there to some point in time in the future. The other one has been with, of course, AI agents that keeps on blowing up more and more with folks now being able to essentially have these types of a chat bot is not the right word, but essentially being able to have different forms of like AI tutor bots inside of our courses,
Yeah.
which started in Georgia Tech back in 2015. And then, of course, it started to gain more traction with Khan Academy and Comigo with being able to not just give students the answers, but to be able to prompt and ask more and more questions to be able to help them get to that same destination. And now everyone's doing it. I saw that UPenn is doing it. We're doing it at MIT. It's just going to become a natural thing in the future. So I bet AI tutor bots are going to be here everywhere pretty soon.
Completely agree. Any other ideas, thoughts?
I have some thought. It's a little bit scattered though in my head, so I'll do my best to articulate. So the way I see it with all the emerging technologies and whatever we call it, what is it, future trends, I start seeing uncanny valley uh, graph or diagram
Mhm.
graph, right? So in any emerging technology, the uncanny valley things will happen, right? So I think I would like to take an approach from the human side. So how would we balance that? I've heard somebody's presentation about the yin yang of education, and it's about like, so there's so overwhelming technology that is like emerging and progressing so rapidly, and we want to balance that, through our human side. So we need to remember again who are our students, try to sit where they are, try to understand from their shoes. What would be their goals? What would be their interests? What would be relevant to them? Yes, we can also include this emerging technology, but remember, we're all human. Go back and what helps me to do that yin yang approach is I have a free tool, and it's called Learner Variability Navigator, and it's created by Digital Promise. It's a nonprofit, so the tool is free. When I am overwhelmed, sometimes I'm overwhelmed, or sometimes I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. I need to find more ideas. I go over there, and then I try to think about my students. Who are my students? They may have be from they may come from all different kinds of backgrounds, and then they may have all like different cognitive what is it development or progress, and they may have all different social emotional learning development. So using that tool, I was able to pick and choose, not just pick and choose, but also think about my students. Okay, my students may be coming from low social economic status, or something else, or maybe some students may have a disability. So if I pick and choose those learning factors, what kind of strategies that I can use? So I start from over there, and what kind of technology that the tool will suggest me.
I also like to mention that, historically, I will say that we all know that we do use reflection papers, right? Reflection activities. And what I feel from human-centric slash student-centric approach, what might happen in the future is that we sometimes need to ask our students, what two things you've learned from this class, right? How would you like to use this information in the future? Because sometimes we need to reflect, and we can use different AI tools and make students to reflect with AI on what they learned. And AI actually can not only can AI provide this feedback like nice ideas. Here's what else you can do. Here's the additional materials you can read about this. Well, we definitely want faculty instructor to be the part of that, right? We don't want just to rely on AI and ask students to reflect using AI tools, but in the future, like Luke mentioned, those it's not chatbots, AI agents, right? They can provide some ideas. What else you can do? How you can use this information from the class when you, let's say, go and work, right? When you look for your future career adventures. So yeah, I think this is like reflection is the also one of the it sounds like a basic active learning strategy, but sometimes we don't know how to use it appropriately. And I think this is for the future. I think we will spend more time in thinking about how to implement reflection activities to our classes. Before we finish our seminar, I'd like to show two things to our audience. Andrew, if you can launch that, that will be really helpful. The first one is that we'd like to promote our really great project that is full of ideas, teaching ideas, tool ideas, and point of views. And we call this project EdTech IDEAS Digest. This project consists of three categories. This is fully available, free project where you can learn more about trends, what is happening in the educational technology world, what best practices, let's say how to use different active learning strategies, how to make your classes more engaging. You can read different strategies both ideas group from our instructional designers as well as from other folks with whom we have interviews. And point of view, there is another category where we have interviews with really great experts in the field of instructional design, and they share their kind of best practices, how they teach. So you can see this on your screen now. You can scan the QR code. Again, fully available online. We send monthly digests to our participants who sign up for our events. So if you sign up for the event today and you indicated that you'd like to receive updates from us, you will definitely receive the digest in your mailbox. And the second thing we'd like to ask you today, it will be really, really great if you can send us some feedback about today's event, because we read all the comments. We're trying to improve our event. So we ask really like simple 3 questions. What do you think about the seminar? Are you going to recommend it to other colleagues? And any suggestions for the future? It will be really helpful if you can help us to submit your feedback. Otherwise, that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a really great discussion. I really enjoyed everything that we discussed today. Hopefully, you also enjoy that, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you so much. Take care.